Good evening, everyone. It is really an honor for me to participate tonight in the awarding of the Tran, Nhan, Tong Reconciliation Prize, and I'm very grateful for the invitation from Mr. Nguyen Antoine for me to speak. It's a great privilege to be able to add my voice to the celebration in which we are participating here tonight, a celebration of the outstanding rapprochement and new spirit of cooperation and compromise that over the last few months the world has watched unfold in amazement and delight between the government of Myanmar and the National League for Democracy. While my brief remarks are going to focus on the critical role of Aung San Suu Kyi in this phenomenal turn of events in Myanmar, it is by no means to disregard the courage and vision for the future of Myanmar also displayed by President U Thein Sein and all that he has begun to do in the way of political and social reforms, the relaxing of media laws, as you just heard, the legalization of protests, the releasing of hundreds of political prisoners and allowing fair elections to go forward, the very elections that have finally won for Aung San Suu Kyi and other members of her party a rightful place in the government of Myanmar. I actually had the privilege of getting to know Aung San Suu Kyi many years ago when her husband, the Tibetologist Michael Aris, participated in a multi-university project to recover old Buddhist manuscripts in Nepal, in which I, at the time a graduate student working on Tibetan Buddhism, I also took part. Suu Kyi was also there with their newborn son, Alexander. This was in 1973. More than a decade before Suu Kyi's momentous destiny had begun to unfold. In the month when we all were living together in a house in Kathmandu while waiting for our trekking permits, I remember being struck most of all by Suu Kyi's regal bearing and sense of herself, even while carrying out the most mundane tasks of being a mother and wife in which she was entirely immersed at the time. But what is most arresting to me now, as I review these memories, is not those glimmerings, discernible even then, of her destiny as a great leader, but rather what she had to sacrifice in order to fulfill that destiny. What captures my attention now is the memory of the love of her family, especially of her husband, my colleague Michael, which I also observed then, and over the years that I continue to see Michael in scholarly venues, along with that of the two sons that she went on to raise. Most great humanitarian acts involve significant personal sacrifice, but in Aung San Suu Kyi's case, the choice between her loved ones and her duty to the people of Myanmar was exceptionally stark and bifurcated. There was no way to have them both, not even just a little bit. It was entirely, it had to be one or the other. In asking me to offer a few remarks today, Mr. Nguyen requested that I speak to the role of Buddhism in the reconciliation between Aung San Suu Kyi and the rulers of Myanmar. But in the course of our discussion, I pointed out to him that I have reservations in identifying Buddhism as such, as the reason for the hopeful developments unfolding there today. On the one hand, the resilient steadfastness of purpose and commitment to nonviolence that has made for the success of Aung San Suu Kyi's cause are common to many religions. And indeed, the very notion of nonviolent struggle was articulated in terms of Hindu values, of course, by Gandhi, and it was equally compelling and empowering in the Christian idioms of Dr. Martin Luther King. And on the other hand, it's hardly the case that all Buddhist leaders today or in the past are paragons of virtue and integrity. Aung San Suu Kyi herself has championed the work of Burmese literary figures like Tang Pe Min, a devout Buddhist whose novel Modern Monk castigates the many corrupt Burmese Buddhist monks and Sangha leaders. Indeed, Aung San Suu Kyi insists on a distinction between the Buddhist identity to which most Burmese claim inheritance, albeit superficially, and an intentional and deeply committed adaptation of Buddhist practices and concepts as a way to focus and channel the kind of resolve and moral commitment necessary for beneficial action on behalf of one's people. So Buddhism does not stand in a privileged position over against other religious and moral traditions to offer the world resources for social justice or democracy, even if it does have distinctive contributions to make. And again, these resources need to be mobilized intentionally and in light of contemporary conditions, in light of contemporary media, and in light of shifting cultural significances of Buddhist institutions and symbols. 20th century Buddhist monks, in fact, then have drawn strategically on their moral authority as celibate ascetics to stage striking political protests in Vietnam, more recently in Tibet, and of course the Buddhist monastic community in Burma has been outstanding in leading its citizens in massive demonstrations in the so-called Saffron Revolution of 2007, highlighting both the traditional Buddhist value of nonviolence and the moral prestige of the monastic. And Aung San Suu Kyi herself has drawn judiciously and again intentionally and self-consciously on old Buddhist notions of kingship to ground the ideology of the movement in Myanmar for democracy and justice. She writes of a Buddhist view of history that values above all the ruler who can restore peace and moral order by virtue of the consent of the people. She also speaks at length of the category of the 10 duties of kings, translating in the process such virtues as liberality, integrity, kindness, austerity, non-anger, non-violence, and non-opposition to the will of the people, translating them into terms directly relevant to the situation in Myanmar today. She acknowledges that in Buddhist story traditions, the complete self-sacrifice of the hermit in service of freeing others from suffering is more relevant to high religious goals rather than what could plausibly describe the work of the modern public servant. She's using language from old Buddhist texts that point to higher principles, principles that constitute duties transcending individual desire and biases, and indeed particular cultures or religions. In this, she is identifying traditional Buddhist values that stand as universal principles with the modern conceptions underlying the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to which Aung San Suu Kyi has made very effective reference. For Aung San Suu Kyi personally, commitment to such universal principles has meant an ineluctable sense of duty to her people that had to trump her role as a mother and wife, or at least made her into a very distant, if exemplary, mother and wife. It's a duty she discerned long ago on the, on the occasion of her marriage, and to which both husband and wife agreed as a foundational condition for their own commitment to each other. Michael Aris was visiting professor in Harvard's Department of Sanskrit and Indian Studies in 1991 when he put together the collection of Aung San Suu Kyi's writings published under the title Freedom from Fear. He writes of her catapult into the Burmese political spotlight in the introduction to the volume. The promise to support her decision, he writes, which I had given in advance so many years ago, now had to be fulfilled. I had imagined that if a day of reckoning were to come, it would happen later in life, when our children were grown up. But fate and history never seemed to work in orderly fashion. All that Sue had to draw on were her finely cultivated sense of commitment and her powers of reason. But she was also blessed and burdened with her unique status as the daughter of a national hero. Well, those same powers, blessings, and burdens continue to nurture this extraordinarily brave woman as she held on to her principles for 23 years, repeatedly refusing release from house arrest if it meant that she had to leave the country and thereby be prevented from serving her people's quest for democracy, even if it did mean that she could be reunited with her family. Aung San Suu Kyi became known in Myanmar as the female bodhisattva, a special term for a Buddhist saint who devotes all efforts for the welfare of others, but it's a term rarely applied to women. Her dedication and integrity meant that when the retired prime minister and member of the military junta ruling Myanmar was elected as a civilian to the office of president of the country, a man who, it turns out, has the vision to recognize a different path for Myanmar, a path in which civil liberties would earn the country entree into the world community, and global efforts towards progress and development, it turned out he had the perfect partner. Both share, it turns out, deeply pragmatic convictions. Both are resolved to do what has to be done for change to happen, and especially to continence negotiation and compromise. And there can also be no doubt that Aung San Suu Kyi is the perfect negotiation partner for President U Thein Sein because of her potent of the potent symbol that she has become in the Burmese imagination. So we can only hope and offer our hope that as Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and her party move forward in collaboration with the President's new government, they will find ways to expand civil liberties, democracy, and ethnic tolerance and cooperation in Myanmar. As Myanmar takes its place on the world stage, it has an extraordinary opportunity to provide leadership as an Asian model of compromise and social reconciliation in our troubled times, at a moment when so many other countries and leaders are having such a hard time to find their way to peace, tolerance, and a flourishing society. Thank you.